Hi, everybody. VParty here with the VPartySports Podcast. See my handle down there at the bottom, at VPartySports on Twitter and on Instagram. You can reach me on Facebook and YouTube, VParty. Look up anytime you get a chance. We're here today, a little after 3 o'clock Eastern on the East Coast, 12 o'clock on the West Coast. Don't forget our daily post will be at 6 Eastern tonight on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And if you're interested in sponsorships, contact me directly. All right, let's get to the evening of Thursday night. Let's start in the Big Ten. A lot of college games to go to. Wisconsin over Ohio State, 65-60. They were 7.5 point underdog was Wisconsin, and they came out and started out like gangbusters, an 8-0 run to open up the game. 65-60, the final score for Wisconsin. Michigan, 68-51. They were 3.5 point underdog at Northwestern. Northwestern had been playing well, but they lost over the weekend to I forget who they lost to. Let's find out. I'll tell you who they lost to in about 5 seconds here. They lost to Iowa as a makeup game. They had a lot of makeup games in the last 2 weeks, and so they played about 4 games in about 2 weeks. A lot for a college basketball team, and they obviously were a little tired, and Michigan came in and ran all over them. 68-51 in the Big Ten for Michigan over Northwestern. Wisconsin, again, 65-60 over Ohio State. The standings in the Big Ten, Purdue 11-1, Illinois and Rutgers both 7-4, Iowa 6-5, Northwestern 6-5, and Michigan State, Maryland, and Indiana all 6-5 in the Big Ten. Big schedule coming up on Saturday for the Big Ten. 4 games. Michigan State at Rutgers early. Rutgers defense outstanding. Michigan State, tough time on the road. Illinois, Iowa. Illinois at Iowa. Interesting game for Iowa. They've won their last few. Illinois has lost a couple in a row, including the big one that they had against Indiana a couple of Thursdays ago. Speaking of Indiana, Purdue will visit their in-state rival at Indiana tomorrow at 4 o'clock. The number 1 team against the number 21 team in Bloomington, Illinois. And then Maryland, who's been hot. They've won 2 in a row. They are at Minnesota tomorrow night. All right, the Pac-12 games now. UCLA did not cover 17.5. I told you, heavy lines like that are going to be tough. The game did stay under. It was one of my best plays of the day. 70-61, UCLA over Washington State. Arizona State did not cover -12, missed out by a point. They win by 11 over Oregon State. That's a tough one to swallow. As most of you know, these are tough to pick every once in a while. And when you miss by that so close, 68-57 over Oregon State. Oregon State came out and played well to open up the game. They've been struggling all year, but they've come out and played well yesterday to start. Eventually, Arizona State wore them down in the second half. Stanford goes into Salt Lake City and upsets the University of Utah, 78-72. Now, we know Utah has had a tough time the last couple of games. They got beat up by Oregon on Saturday night, and now they go home to face Stanford and get beat by 6. Stanford, a 6-point underdog in that game, 78-72, Utah. Colorado, 59-48. Colorado has not been very good in conference play, but Cal has been even worse. But still a 15.5-point favorite in conference. An 11-point victory for Colorado. Cal gets the cover. The game stays well under the total. 107 was the final score at 59-48 for Colorado. Arizona, an 8-point favorite over Oregon. They win by 15, 91-76. The game goes over. I believe the total was in the 150s. 151.5 was the total. So the game goes over at 168. Arizona continues their good play. And USC over Washington State. They had a rough start to start the game. They were down midway through the first half, but they rally in the second half. Boogie Ellis was big, 80-70. They covered the 7 or 7.5, whatever you had there for USC. I had them at -7. They came through. In the standings, UCLA with that win, they're 9-2. Arizona 9-3. USC 8-3. Utah with that loss is now at 8-5, but they're still ahead of Arizona State and Oregon, who are at 7-5. And then under 500 is Washington, Colorado. Washington State at 5-8. Stanford 4-7. Although they played better the last few weeks, they were last in the Pac-12 about a week and a half ago. And then Oregon State 3-9. Cal 2-9. We said that Cal had not played very well this year, and sure enough, they came through and lost again last night, though they did cover for our purposes. All right, WCC, BYU, an 89-61 winner over Loyola Marymount. BYU a 5-point favorite there. Big win for BYU. UOP 81-72, slight upset over Pepperdine. I believe Pepperdine, now UOP was favored by 1.5, but Pepperdine had been playing well, and they go up into Stockton and lose 81-72. Portland 80-61. That is an upset over San Diego. That was in San Diego. San Diego Toreros under Steve Lavin, 2-point favorites. They get beat by 19 in that game. Gonzaga continues their good play. They still have one loss in the conference. They win over Santa Clara, 88-70. I believe that covers for them. It was a 13.5-point spread. The game stayed under 161.5 for Gonzaga. So 88-70 Gonzaga over Santa Clara. St. Mary's stays undefeated in the conference. They get a 68-59 win over USF. They do not cover the 12.5. They stay under the 130.5. The game ended up at 127. So let's look at the standings here in the WCC. St. Mary's now 9-0, still in first place, a game ahead of Gonzaga, who's 8-1. Loyola Marymount 6-4 is 3.5 back. UOP 5-4, BYU 5-5 in the WCC. Santa Clara, Portland, and USF all in the middle of the pack, and then University of San Diego 3-7 in conference. Pepperdine, they were slight favorites, and I know that UOP had played pretty well this year, but Pepperdine is 0-10 in conference, 7-17 overall, so maybe not that much of a surprise. All right, let's hit some of the college basketball. We'll have a full rundown of the games. For you on Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern is when we'll be back. 6 a.m. on the West Coast. We'll have all the college basketball set up, all the NBA set up. The NHL has their All-Star game. The NFL has the Pro Bowl skills competition going on. So let's get some of the ACC games in here. This is from yesterday. Some of the big things going on in the ACC. North Carolina State has been hot. Virginia has been hot. Syracuse not. BC has not been hot, though they beat up on Clemson. Clemson still leading the conference at 10-2. All right, Saturday, Virginia at Virginia Tech. That's an in-state rivalry. Wake Forest at Notre Dame. Georgia Tech at North Carolina State. Look out for the Wolfpack right now. They're playing well. Florida State at Louisville. That's not a very good game, but Florida State should be favored in that game against Louisville, though Louisville got a win on Wednesday over Georgia Tech, 68-58 on Wednesday. So Louisville will try and back that up with back-to-back wins over Florida State. Miami and Clemson, number 23 Miami will visit Clemson. That's a big game in the ACC. Miami at 8-4, Clemson at 10-2. That can pull Miami to one game behind if they can figure out how to beat Clemson on the road. That's going to be tough to see that Miami can do that because Clemson has played well, though they did lose on the road to Boston College earlier in the week. And Syracuse, speaking of Boston College, Syracuse will visit Boston College up on Chestnut Hill up there. And that game will go at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock on the West Coast on the ACC network. North Carolina and Duke. Passionate matchup. We all know about North Carolina and Duke. Both teams are relevant right now. Both are 7-4 in conference. They're a little behind Clemson and Virginia. And Pitt, don't forget about Pitt, 9-3. Pitt just upset North Carolina this week. So it's Duke, North Carolina, the rivalry, the history of it all there in the ACC. All right, in the ACC, in the American, we have 3 games on Saturday, UCF and Cincinnati. Cincinnati at home, they played well. Tulane and Memphis will go at it. Tulane 14-7, Memphis 17-5 overall. SMU 8-15 against East Carolina. Thursday, there was one game. Houston won 70-61 over Wichita State. They did not cover the 12.5. I believe the game just barely went over 131.5, so it stayed under. So it stayed under 131.5 for Houston. And the total, Houston now in terms of standings, they are 9-1 ahead of Temple, who is 8-2. I'm sorry, they're 9-1, one game better than Temple. Memphis at 7-2, Tulane 7-3, Cincinnati 6-4, can make their way back. UCF at 4-5. So big games on Saturday for the ACC with UCF Cincinnati, Tulane and Memphis, and SMU East Carolina. All right, the Big 12. I maintain the Big 12. Still the best conference in all of basketball, top to bottom. We know about Texas. They beat Baylor, and Iowa State blew the big lead in their loss to Texas Tech. They've blown a couple of leads. Kansas beat Kansas State, TCU over West Virginia, and Oklahoma State showed their mark defensively by sweeping Oklahoma. This one on the road is a 3.5-point favorite. Good matchups in the Big 12 on Saturday. Number 8, Kansas will go to Ames, Iowa to play Iowa State. Number 13, Iowa State coming off that loss Monday, the 28-point lead. I'd be surprised if Iowa State is favored by a lot, but it also wouldn't surprise me to see it even or Kansas a little bit of a favorite. Texas Tech, who's been not very good conference-wise, though they've covered. They were the ones that came back in Iowa State from 28 down at home. They are going to visit the Baylor Bears. That game at 1 o'clock Eastern. By the way, Kansas, Iowa State at noon. Texas Tech, Baylor at 1 o'clock. TCU, number 15, will go to Oklahoma State. We just talked about Oklahoma State's defense. That's going to be tough for TCU to go in there offensively and put up a lot of points against a very talented defensively Oklahoma State team. Boone has been great for Oklahoma State this year as well. Number 10, Texas, they will go to Kansas State. Kansas State, off their loss to Kansas on the road, they get a home game against the Texas Longhorns. That game in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2. But Texas at number 10, Kansas State at number 7. Final game in the Big 12, Oklahoma, coming off their loss to Oklahoma State. But remember, they beat up on Alabama. They beat Alabama by 35 points last Saturday in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. They're going to take on West Virginia. West Virginia coming off their win over TCU on Tuesday night. So that's what we got going in the Big 12. In the Big East, as we move over to the Big East, the standings in the Big East, Xavier and Marquette are tied at 10-2. They're both red hot right now. Marquette's won 4 in a row. Xavier coming off that loss last weekend, but was able to get the win over Marquette, over Providence on Wednesday night. Providence, meanwhile, 9-3. A game back, Creighton 8-3. They are hot. They've won 5 in a row and 2 this week. They're a game and a half back. Seton Hall 7-5. Connecticut got off to an 11-0 start. They're 6-6 in their last 12. They're 17-6 overall, but 6-6 in conference play. And then Villanova, who lost the other night. St. John's, who got beat by Seton Hall. Butler, DePaul, both 3-9. And Georgetown, who does have a conference win, but they're 1-11. All right, the scores in Saturday lineup. UConn will visit Georgetown. That'll be early on FS1. Butler at Marquette, number 14 Marquette. That game will follow on FS1. St. John's at Xavier. This Xavier team can score. St. John's can score as well, but Xavier's defense came through in that overtime win over Providence on Wednesday night. And then Villanova will be at Creighton. That's primetime hoops for the network for Fox. Villanova at 10-12. Creighton at 14-8. We just said Creighton won 5 in a row and 2 this week. The MAC conference, we've got 2 games today. The MAC Ball State at Ball State versus Eastern Michigan. 11-point favorite, 152 the total. And Akron is a 1-point underdog at home to Kent State. And the standings, as we told you yesterday, Kent State and Akron are leading the way. Both are going to play each other. This is a huge game in the MAC tonight for Kent State and Akron. 8-1. They both are Toledo right behind them. Whoever loses this game is going to be a benefactor for Toledo. So there you have the 2 games in the MAC. Standings-wise, we said Kent and Akron. Toledo at 7-2. Saturday's games. Miami, Ohio, at Ohio University. Buffalo at Western Michigan. Northern Illinois and Bowling Green. And then Toledo, the big game in the conference for Saturday, will host Central Michigan. So there's your Mid-American MAC Conference update for today. The Missouri Valley Conference had some great games in the Missouri Valley Conference on Wednesday. Northern Iowa with that 2 overtime win, 88-81 over Drake. Murray State, the 1-point win over Belmont. Indiana State over Evansville, and Illinois State in overtime over Drake. Southern Illinois, Bradley, Belmont are all 9-4. They lead the conference. Bradley also 9-4 with Iowa State, Murray State, Northern Iowa, and Missouri State all 8-5. So the Missouri Valley Conference, very good basketball in that conference. No games today, but keep an eye out for them because they can be bracket busters and they can be tournament busters. On Saturday, Evansville at University of Illinois Chicago, Murray State at Indiana State. That'll be a good one. Illinois State will be at Belmont. That'll be a good one. Bradley and Northern Iowa will be very good. And then Drake at Valparaiso, and that'll be a good one as well too. As Valparaiso just came off a loss to Missouri State in overtime. They're pretty talented, and Drake will have their hands full with Valparaiso. Valparaiso 4-9 in the conference. In Illinois State 5-8, and then Illinois Chicago 1-12. Evansville has yet to win a game in conference. They're 0-13. So there you have it for the Missouri Valley Conference. All right, 2 games in the Mountain West: San Diego State and Boise State. This is a huge game in the Mountain West. It's going to be on Fox Sports 1 tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern. Both the Mountain West games will be on Fox Sports 1. San Diego State, number 22 in the nation. They're a 5.5-point favorite, 134 the total versus Boise State. Here's what's on the line for them. San Diego State is 8-2. They are tied with Boise State. The winner takes over first place in this conference by a game. And Nevada right behind them at 7-3. Utah State at 7-3. Air Force, who is 3-7 in conference, will go up against Nevada Reno, who is 7-3, as we said in the conference, 17-6 overall, an 11-point favorite, 135 the total in that game. All right, we gave you the standings. So some of the Saturday games: Utah State, Colorado State. Wyoming will be at San Jose State tomorrow night. Okay, in the Pac-12, as we wrap through the college basketball before we take a break here. Last night in the Pac-12, we gave you the scores of the Pac-12 Saturday's games. Will be Washington State at UCLA, Oregon State at Arizona, Washington at USC, and Oregon State at Arizona State. The Washington-USC game will be on Fox Sports 1 as part of the Pac-12 package. Standings-wise, we gave UCLA a half game better than Arizona, a full game better than USC, and 2 games better than Utah. And then Arizona State and Oregon follow behind at 7-5. All right, the SEC, they had their Big 12 challenge last week, but they also had some games during the week. Let me update you on that as well. 3-7 against the Big 12 this week. But on Wednesday, Tennessee lost to Florida. That was kind of an upset. As Florida beat Tennessee at home. They were a 5-point underdog there at home for the Florida Gators. So 64-57. The game stayed under. Georgia lost to Auburn, 21 points. Auburn favored by 12 in that game. I believe the game went over. This was on Wednesday night. 141, yeah, the game went over. And then Missouri over LSU. They pushed at -10. Some of you had it at 9.5. The Saturday games for the SEC: Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. Arkansas, South Carolina. Number 4, Alabama visits LSU. Missouri will visit Mississippi State. Georgia will be at Texas A&M. Florida will be at Kentucky. That's a rivalry game as well. But the big one in the SEC will be at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock on ESPN. Number 25, Auburn will visit number 2, Tennessee in the state of Tennessee at Thompson-Boylan Arena in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that's where that'll be. Tennessee 18-4, Auburn 17-5. Conference standings-wise, Alabama still at the top at 9-0. That Big 12 loss did not hurt them. Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Auburn are all 7-2. Kentucky and Florida both 6-3, and Missouri at 5-4. Everybody else down below, but there's still going to be a lot of teams coming out of the tournament. Probably Arkansas is one of them, and Georgia maybe another one of them. They can get a few more wins, 14-8 overall, but 4-5 in the conference. The SEC is a good conference, but it's not meant for the meant for the big boys of the Big 12 right now. All right, in terms of the WCC, gave you the schedule for the WCC for Saturday. We went through the games from yesterday. BYU over Loyola Marymount, Pacific over Pepperdine, Portland over USD. Gonzaga stays within a game of St. Mary's with their win over Santa Clara. St. Mary's undefeated, 68-59 over USF. Saturday, Portland will be at Pepperdine. University of Pacific will be at BYU. Santa Clara will travel up north to San Francisco to take on the USF Dons. Loyola Marymount will take on the San Diego Toreros. In a huge game tomorrow night, 10:30 Eastern on ESPN, number 12 Gonzaga will visit Moraga, take on the number 18 St. Mary's Gales. Huge game for them. I don't think they played each other. Excuse me. I don't think they played each other this year. Tomorrow night might be the first time they play. Yes, tomorrow night will be the first time they play. It will be in Moraga, California. The winner will have first place and the tiebreaker to go with that. Gonzaga wins. They'll be tied with St. Mary's, but they'll have the tiebreaker. St. Mary's wins. They'll be 2 games up on Gonzaga with the tiebreaker. The next time they play will be on February 25th at 7 o'clock in Spokane, Washington, for St. Mary's and Gonzaga on that Saturday night. So tomorrow night, huge game for Gonzaga, St. Mary's in Moraga. All right, that's your college basketball setup for today. We'll give you all the details of the Saturday games tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. When we come back, we'll talk a little NBA, a couple of trade deadline rumors going about, and we'll give you the schedule and the lines for this Friday. Vasi Vadaparty here with you on the VPartySports Podcast, at VPartySports on Twitter and Instagram, Vasi Vadaparty on Facebook and YouTube. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Welcome back to the VPartySports Podcast. Vasi Vadaparty here with you on this Friday, about 20 minutes after 3 o'clock on the East Coast, 12 o'clock on the West Coast, live. Don't forget, if you missed any of this information, there'll be a replay coming up at 4 o'clock and then another one at 5 o'clock before we get tip-offs. One game I wanted to give you as a best bet, the Yale-Harvard basketball game will take place at 5 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. It is at Harvard. Harvard, a 3-point underdog at home. These two do not like each other. Take Harvard, and you will have your way. In fact, I'll tell you right now, I'll put it up here right now. So it's on there, so you know Harvard +3 as your best bet early. The Daily Post will be at 6 o'clock Eastern for the rest of the games tonight, but Harvard +3 as your daily bet. All right, that puts the actual cap on college basketball. Trade rumors in the NBA. How about the big one that just came out today? Kyrie Irving has requested a trade. He's going to opt in for free agency during the summer unless his trade request is met so that he can move on before the trade deadline, which is next Thursday. He wants out of Brooklyn. He wants to get into free agency, and he wants to leave the Nets. Don't know what that means for the Nets or for Kevin Durant or for the rest of that squad. Jacques Vaughn, the interim head coach, I'm not sure if they've given him the title yet, but maybe people on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram can help me out with that. But these are what's going on. It's just interesting. You had the story with him a couple of years ago, and the vaccination issue and everything like that. But he wants it out of He wants out of Brooklyn. He wants out of Brooklyn. If he doesn't get traded before the trade deadline, then he will opt into free agency. All right, Luka Doncic is going to miss the game Saturday against the Warriors. Lakers rally behind Indianapolis. We'll give you the NBA scores from Thursday as the lines go up today. Lakers rally behind LeBron's output, 112-111 over Indiana. Grizzlies lose to Cleveland, 128-113. That was one of my games yesterday. -6 or 6.5, depending on where you had it. And then the Heat lose at New York. They were a 2-point favorite, 106-104. They had a chance to win it. At the end, a three-pointer at the buzzer by Tyler Hero did not go in. And then the Bulls, 114-98 over the Hornets, a 6-point favorite there. Mavericks barely covered the 4.5 against the Pelicans, 111-106. And then the Nuggets, who were down big to the Warriors. The Warriors have only won 2 road games, 134-117. The final ended up as a cover for Denver. They were a 12-point favorite going in. Then Curry started for the Warriors, played. The line went down to 6, and they ended up winning by 17 anyway. And then the game of the night in Milwaukee. Milwaukee did not cover the 4. They won 106-105. They were down by as many as 17 or 18. Clippers are a very funny team. You just can't figure them out. Paul George and Kawhi played great last night, but there were missed free throws, bad play offensively, and really lapses on defense. And the Bucks came back with the 106-105 victory. All right, tonight, Detroit a 1-point favorite over Charlotte, 239.5. Washington 3.5 over those hot Blazers, 236.5. Sacramento 4 and 233 at Indianapolis. Indiana has Tyrese Halliburton back, the former King guard that was drafted number 12 by Sacramento. He is on the floor for Indiana. He is back. 233 the total. Both teams can score. That game might be an over game. Boston against the struggling Phoenix Suns. Phoenix got derailed at home by 32 against Atlanta. A 9-point favorite for the Celtics over Phoenix, 220.5 the total there. They don't score a lot, does Phoenix. Boston can put up points. That's an iffy total. Toronto at Houston, 7.5. At the Rockets, 225. Watch out for Houston at home. They are a tough team at home. They've covered at home more than they haven't. 225 the total. This game could be an over as well, too. Minnesota, who's played better in the last week, though they've lost the last couple of games, they are a 4.5-point favorite versus the Orlando Magic. 229.5 there. Philadelphia, who's the hottest team in basketball, one of the hottest teams in basketball right now, they lost to Orlando, but they're 8 of their last 10. They are visiting San Antonio. San Antonio's been awful this year, second to last. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They've lost 7 in a row. They're 14-38. A 10-point favorite. Sometimes that might not seem enough for some cases, but San Antonio can put points on the board. 234.5 is the total, and that's evident by the total that's on the board. And how about this total? 242 points for the Utah Jazz at -1.5 versus the hot Atlanta Hawks right now. The Hawks are 6-4 in their last 10, but that game against Phoenix the other night was tremendous. The Hawks in out-of-conference games are 17. They are 9-9 out of conference against the Western Conference teams this year. Meanwhile, Utah is in the 8th spot. They're 19-15 in conference, so they're 8-11 out of conference, and they're only a 1.5-point favorite, 242 the total. So trade deadline is next week. OG Anunoby from the Toronto Raptors is one of the names being mentioned. So is Zach LaVine from the Chicago Bulls. A lot of other manipulations and machinations. Fred VanVleet, also from Toronto, a possibility. Charlotte has said today that they're looking to move some of their veterans as well, as they are not going anywhere. Let me see who's in the market for buying. I think Boston is looking for a big man because the injury factor for Robert Williams is big. They need somebody in there. Milwaukee, if Middleton doesn't come back as healthy as he's been, could look for another shooter. Philadelphia probably needs another shooter to go with James Harden out there. Thibault on the trading block as a piece to draw somebody back in as well. In the West, Denver, Memphis can probably use a backup center. They have not had Steven Adams the last 2 games, and it's hurt them rebounding-wise. Sacramento can probably use one more defensive player because they can score with anybody. Dallas, maybe a third scorer because Dinwiddie can't do it all. And now Doncic is going to miss Saturday night with the Warriors. And now Doncic is going to miss Saturday night. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out why my glasses are off center here. There we go. I don't know. Maybe my face is off center. But anyway, Minnesota, they're in 6th place. Are they going to make a move or they're not going to make a move? And then Phoenix, I feel like their window of opportunity is closing. They're in 7th, and then Utah, Golden State, and New Orleans. What type of team does Golden State want to be? Do they want to trade? Do they want to come in? They've only won 2 road games this year. I take that back. They've only won 7 road games this year. 7-20 on the road, 19-6 at home. This just came across. Kyrie Irving interested in the Lakers. Of course, he played with LeBron James in Cleveland. That's one of the trades pieces that he requested a trade, and so that's where he's looking to go. Maybe free agency. The Lakers can go after him. All right, best bets for the week: 14, 17-1. Not very good for the week, but 12 games over 500 for year to date. Did have a good NBA Wednesday, bad NBA Thursday. Best bets at 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific. Don't forget, we'll be back at 6 a.m. Eastern on the West Coast, 9 a.m. on the East Coast. Don't forget replays of this show going on as well as tomorrow, right up until tip-offs at noon for college basketball. The NBA, college basketball, the NHL is on their All-Star break. The All-Star game will be tomorrow from Miami, Florida. So they're all set. And then one last one, let me give you the update on the Super Bowl. The line has moved around in some places, but for the most part, I still see Philadelphia minus 1.5 versus Kansas City, 50.5 the total. It'll be on February 12th on Fox Sports, 6:30 Eastern from Glendale, Arizona. Of course, everybody's interested in Patrick Mahomes and his ankle right now. The Philadelphia Eagles, their defense against Patrick Mahomes and that pass offense, I think they can stop the run, but they're just going to have to figure out how to stop the great Mahomes and that offense of Andy Reid. The Andy Reid Bowl, forget to mention that. He coached at Philadelphia for 13 years. This is his 10th year with Kansas City. The Kelsey brothers, of course, Jason Kelsey, the center, has a world championship back in 2017 with the Eagles and when they beat the Patriots. And Travis has his Super Bowl ring against the 49ers in 2019. They'll be battling against each other the first time two brothers are playing against each other, or their teams are playing against each other. They won't be facing each other at all. So that's what we have for the Super Bowl. Only 9 more days away for Super Bowl 57 LVII, for those who like the Roman numerals. And we will be set up for that all next week. Media Row, Radio Row. Going to try and get down to Arizona next week and try and get some shows done, get some interviews done. I'll give you more details on Monday on the Daily Post and on Saturday and Sunday for the VPartySports Podcast. All right, that's going to do it for me. I am Vasi Vadaparty. Thank you again for supporting the show at VPartySports on Twitter and on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, Vasi Vadaparty. Have a great Friday. Good luck with your games. We will talk soon. Take care, everybody. Don't forget, replays coming up at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock Eastern, right up until tip-offs.